Big news, Lovevery just released their reading skill sets, which are said to get your child reading in 18 months. And in this video, we're gonna look at whether or not that claim is actually possible. I'm gonna share my initial thoughts and a high-level look at what's inside each of the boxes. This video is gonna be the first in a 4-part series. In future videos, I'll do my typical deeper look at every single item, our qualitative experience with it, and an attempt to find a dupe for it. So be sure to hit that subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss those videos. And if you're new here, my name is Rachel from The Confused Mom. Welcome to my channel. I share baby and toddler product reviews, activities, as well as Montessori at home tips. And I have reviewed all things Lovevery since 2020, typically from the perspective of my mom who has had the items for at least 6 months. In the description box below, I will leave chapters to jump ahead to any part of this video that's most relevant to you, as well as links to shop Lovevery's reading skill set, subscribe to their play kits. You guys can use discount code TCM on new subscriptions. Let's jump in. Essentially, the reading skill sets by Lovevery are a carefully crafted selection of games, books, and educational materials that are broken down into 3 different boxes. Part 1 is the sounds to reading, which is intended to work preschool and kindergarten skills. Part 2 is the words to books, which is intended for kindergarten to 1st grade skills. And part 3 is the advanced rules to chapter books, which is intended for 1st grade to 2nd grade skills. So with that said, how fast will your child actually be able to read using these? This is just my opinion. Like I said at the start of this, Lovevery claims that these will have your child reading within 18 months. I do want to add some clarity around that. I know in the Montessori parenting space, it's somehow become synonymous that Montessori means reading by like 3 or 4 years old, and these are not going to have 3 or 4-year-olds reading, in my opinion. This is a concept I talked about in my video on mistakes to avoid when teaching preschoolers how to read, but essentially, children are typically most cognitively ready to learn how to read around 6 years old. If you try to teach your child to read earlier than that, you could potentially definitely do it, but what could take a 3-year-old 6 weeks to learn, a 6-year-old could learn in 1 day. It just requires a lot more repetition and patience. So if you're starting this at 3 years old or 4 years old, I don't think most kids would necessarily be reading within 18 months. However, if you follow Lovevery's suggestion of preschool to 2nd grade and you're introducing this at 5.5 years old, yes, I do think kids will be reading within 18 months without a doubt. But I just want to stretch that because preschool has such a big age range now of 3 to like 6 years old in some cases. And if you're introducing it on that lower end, you guys will hear in future videos with my experience with the 3-year-old, that's not going to happen. Just wanted to make that super clear. You can introduce, especially part 1 to 3-year-olds, but then I would hold off on part 2 and stuff until 5, 6 years old. So my initial thoughts. This program is deep and intense and really well thought out. We are currently in part 2, so I haven't gone through the entire thing yet, but I will say my initial experience in trying to find dupes for these items is that Lovevery has truly created a unique, one-of-a-kind experience in the reading space. While there are tons of cheap options out there teaching or reinforcing reading to kids, I've never seen it gamified with such depth and breadth. Meaning you may find a game for one of these concepts, but you're not going to find a game for every single one of these concepts Lovevery came up with. And it really addresses 2 of my biggest struggles as a parent that was trying to teach my kids how to read. The first one being I focus so much on phonics, as in like letter sounds only, instead of teaching all the things that surround reading, like morphemes and graphemes and syntax and semantics, that I started to notice my daughter was kind of hitting a wall. She also went to like 4 different preschools along the way, where one preschool taught phonics, one preschool didn't teach anything till she was 7, another was kind of just teaching memorization. So she definitely had, and I think this happens more often than we realize, some sticky points in her reading progressing. And Lovevery's reading skill set teaches so much more. This isn't about just copying letter shapes and knowing the letter sounds and then blending them. It actually works on the comprehension of words and language and reading. This is about understanding how words are actually built, different parts of the word, sentence structure, punctuation, expressions, building stories, and just like so much more that I have to say I'm beyond impressed because of part 2 in this, which is that we all know the key to teaching kids how to read and write and things like that has to do with repetition. And I've shared this in my mistakes to avoid when teaching preschoolers to read video. That repetition can be very boring for the parent, doing the same letter sounds over and over, the same few games over and over, which are typically pretty taxing on parents. It's pretty easy to get stuck feeling like, okay, what's next? Or I don't want to do this again. But Lovevery, with the way they gamified this and spelled everything out in black and white, has made it so easy to answer those questions and to solve those pain points. I don't have to spend a ton of time setting up a bunch of post-its on my wall for a matching game, or I'm not playing only that game over and over and over again. Instead, I can pick up the compound words game, or we can pick up the wooden letter sound blocks or the beehive game. You can actually work on teaching your kid how to read every single day with a different game that goes back and reinforces something that maybe you worked on a few weeks ago, or moves forward and introduces a new concept without anything feeling stale or burnt out has been the greatest experience with this so far. In future videos, I'll talk about each of these items much slower, our personal experience with each one, as well as trying to find a dupe. So don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification bell. Okay, let's get into a rapid fire of what's included in each of these boxes. First up is part 1, which is all about sounds to reading. This is broken down into 2 sections. For isolating sounds, the first game we have here are compound word pairs, which is essentially a matching game teaching the concept of compound words to build morphological and phonological awareness, and you can make it easier or more challenging depending on the number of pairs you set out. Next, we have the syllable race frame, where kids learn how to break words down into their syllable sounds by flipping over a card, identifying the word, clapping the number of syllables, then moving the dog forward that many spaces. There's also a rhyming game, which features this cute little tree and 2 different sets of spring or fall leaves, which slightly changes the rules of the game, both still reinforcing the concepts of rhyming. After that, we have the follow the sound maze, where you break words into simpler letter sounds by isolating either the beginning or ending sound of a word and follow that sound through the maze to get from the start to finish, which is a great game for them to work on alone or together with somebody else. In the letter sound section, we have the ABCs with Mr. Z, which is a seek and find book that focuses on isolating sounds and finding things that match that sound. We also have a movable alphabet that matches the one from the Persister play kit. These work with the other items that come in this kit, like the wooden letter sound blocks, which was such a blast from the past. I loved these as a kid, which is basically a series of blocks broken down into letter sets. So that's where you use that movable alphabet piece. You give them the alphabet letter, and then they have to go ahead and arrange the blocks to find and match to the alphabet letter. Once your child has that puzzle arranged, you can go ahead and use the skill tokens to deepen the learning lesson. Ask different questions around comparing, describing, and identifying. You can set it up with Buzz Bingo and move things around. You can make that letter block game more challenging by adding more blocks into the mix, or simpler by only working with 4 blocks at a time. So lots of different ways to really elongate the play and use this item. Last in this section is the letter case beehive, which uses the movable alphabet and the honeycomb cards for kids to match the lowercase and uppercase letters together while playing a game with the little bear and the dice to move the bear along to the honeycomb. And the last section of part 1 is all about reverse spelling and reading. To start, we have Sita's Hike to the Beach, which is a wordless picture book that builds towards stronger reading outcomes. The focus here really is on the story structure, while kids are building their listening comprehension and storytelling abilities. Next are the spelling and check slider tiles, where you pick a tile, say the word, and attempt to spell it using the movable alphabet. Kids can check their work by sliding the tile on the board to reveal the correct answer. And lastly is book series 1, which is about taking turns. It includes 5 different books where you read the grown-up part, and then there are parts for your new reader to practice reading, which really builds their confidence in developing their skill set. Part 2 is all about words to books, and again, it has 3 sections. The first one being basic blending. That kicks off with a mystery word decoder game featuring 32 outcomes where you take turns picking up a letter, saying the sound, and then sliding it into the decoder to see if it matches. We also have the second book series, which are totally decodable books that are super simple with the lesson completely spelled out for parents on how to introduce the books, how to work with mistakes that come up, and even work on teaching concepts like expressions. I also love that the pictures are on a different page than the text, because my daughter kept getting tripped up by trying to tell the story by like looking at the picture. And so when I noticed her eyes flitting over to the page, we folded it in half where she could really focus on just the letters, and her reading started to fly. Within a page or 2, she was even reading on her own, which is so cool. I also love that this series had a lot of rhymes, so when my kids got stuck or needed a confidence boost, I was able to pull from concepts we learned in part 1 to really build up their confidence momentum and make things a little bit more fun and give themselves like a little win. So I could ask a question like, oh, mop ha, does that rhyme? And then they could get all excited because they got something right in the middle of mistakes they were making. Next is comprehensive blending, which starts off with the sticky word snack sticks game, which is really used for teaching sight words and sight sounds. Once again, it gives the parents a script on how to introduce these sounds, explaining how to work with them. They even underline the part of the word that needs to be memorized because you can't rely on traditional phonics for it. There's also wooden letter sound tiles, which works with the sound, swap, and drop box and book, which is probably the most traditional item in all of Lovevery's reading skill sets, where basically children will play a game where they're learning how to add, delete, and substitute different letter sounds to create different words. We also have 5 books here that make up the book series 3, which is all about short vowel sounds with instructions for parents on how to introduce and teach the concepts to their children. Next, we have the crossword builder and book. This is so cool. So using the wooden tiles and the provided crossword builder, casings, and book, your kids will learn how to blend pairs of consonants within words. And while I've definitely made my own crossword puzzle before as a teen, I've never seen anything like this for kids, where they can start by recreating the image from the book and then work to solve the blank spots in the puzzle, which get harder as they move further through the book. And we also have book series 4, which is all about consonant blends in 5 different books that really re-emphasize the idea of blending consonant pairs that they practice in the crossword builder game. The third section in part 2 is all about storytelling, and you can introduce this at any time. So you can start with this section if you want, or you can do it alongside either of the other 2 sections, which is what we've personally done. And we even have used this as brain breaks when my 5-year-old kind of like just needed a little reset. But basically this has 2 big items in it. Story order cards, which are color coded and get progressively harder. And there's also the set the scene storytelling stage, which is a turntable with 3 different story scenes plus tons of characters and accessories for telling stories along the way. Part 3 is about advanced rules to chapter books, which again has 3 sections. In the learning vowel rules section, it comes with a ton of games. The first one being the Ends with E adventure game, which is a board game reinforcing how the letter E at the end of a word creates the long vowel sound and shifts the entire meaning and sound of a word. This also has a set of 5 books, really stressing that whole final E concept with a red reveal tool to reveal mystery text. Once again, gamifying things for kids. Second game is Vowel Team Penguin Walk, which is a game that increases repetition and memorization of diphthongs and vowel digraphs, which is basically when a vowel and another letter come together to make a unique vowel sound. Again, there's a book series on this all about vowel teams, featuring 8 books this time that reinforce those things learned in the penguin game and also utilize the red reveal tool to show the mystery text. The third game in this section is the R Vowel Frog Hop, which is a 2-player board game teaching how the letter R affects vowel sounds. Again, there's a book series featuring 5 books all about reinforcing the way R and vowels work together. The next section of part 3 is all about prefixes and suffixes. And to start, we have a cooperative game that's sort of a twist on Mad Libs, where you work together to complete the dialogue using the provided magnet tiles and deepen understanding of prefixes and suffixes while enhancing reading comprehension and getting some laughs in. And then once again, there's a 5-book series all about reinforcing and teaching that concept of prefixes and suffixes. Lastly, it comes with 4 different chapter books, still designed in true Lovevery fashion with real people, objects, and situations in full colors, plus a game idea for reading sentences throughout the book with different emotions. The other thing I love about this program is that they preemptively address some of the concerns or challenges I was facing. For instance, with each of the games, they have tips for success, with suggestions to make things simpler or harder, benchmarks and ages for when you should actually be concerned about a child not grasping a particular concept or mixing things up, tips for incorporating and reinforcing the concepts in your everyday life, so beyond just their games and pulling out books and stuff like that. Sounds so weird to say. They created a reading lifestyle handbook for parents and games for kids. You're not just doing reading and writing sitting down or having to formally set something up that's going to take a lot of energy or time or concentration on the parent's end. You literally open it up, you read the instructions, you can even read them out loud with your kid right there, and then you do it. This system is easily one of the most fun, dynamic, and engaging ones that I've come across. chaos. Like I said, I've never seen reading gamified in this way before. It's literally a homeschooling curriculum with directions for parents to know exactly what to do, how to handle common problems, and build these skills with way less tears and headaches. I'd love to hear what your initial thoughts and impressions were in the comments below. If there's something that you used in the past that you think would work better than this, drop it in the comment below too, so I can take a look at it as I'm working on those more in-depth box by box reviews, and so I can consider those for dupes or alternatives to tell people about. Be sure to go back and check out my past Lovevery reviews, check out that video on mistakes to avoid when teaching preschoolers how to read, and as always, my name is Rachel from The Confused Mom. Have a good one.